June 1940. A steel factory in Berlin. German intelligence officer Franz Weber stood over production reports spread across his desk. The numbers looked good. Germany was building about 250 tanks every month. His analysts had just finished their estimates of American capacity. He smiled as he read the conclusion. The Americans? They might build a few hundred tanks, maybe 1,000. Nothing to worry about. Weber had good reasons to feel confident. Germany's factories were the most modern in Europe. Their engineers were brilliant. Their production methods were efficient. The Americans? They'd been asleep for 20 years. The Great Depression had crushed their industry. In 1939, the American Army ranked 39th in the world. 39th. Below Romania. Below Portugal. The Americans were still using horses to pull their artillery. Weber laughed when he saw photos of American cavalry units. These people weren't ready for modern war. His confidence came from experience, too. In World War I, America had barely gotten started before the fighting ended. This time would be different. Germany was prepared. They'd been building tanks since 1934, training crews, perfecting tactics. The Blitzkrieg had crushed Poland in weeks. France fell in 6. The British Army had been thrown into the sea at Dunkirk. German tanks ruled Europe. Why worry about a country that couldn't even build enough rifles for its own tiny army? Then in May 1940, President Roosevelt made an announcement. He wanted American factories to build 60,000 aircraft in 1942, 125,000 in 1943, plus 120,000 tanks. Weber read the transcript. He put it down. He picked it up again. The numbers couldn't be real. Even Hitler's advisors told him it was propaganda. American propaganda to scare Germany. Nothing more. The math didn't work. Not in Weber's mind. America had built less than 3,000 planes in 1939. Now they wanted 60,000? Impossible. The factories didn't exist. The workers weren't trained. The machinery wasn't there. It would take years to build that capacity. By then, the war would be over. Germany would control Europe. America would be too late. But Weber didn't know something critical. He didn't understand American industry. Not really. Germany's factories were good at making a few perfect things. American factories were good at making millions of anything. They'd learned how to build cars. In 1929, American factories built 5 million automobiles. 5 million. That was more than the rest of the world combined. And they did it every single year. The Americans had perfected something the Germans never quite grasped. Mass production. Real mass production. Not just efficient manufacturing. Complete interchangeability. Standardized parts. Assembly lines that never stopped. Henry Ford could build a car every 63 seconds at his River Rouge plant. The building was so big it had its own zip code. 80,000 workers on one site. Raw materials went in one end, finished cars came out the other. Now those same factories were switching to war production, and the Germans had no idea what was coming. November 1942, North Africa. German tank commander Hans Richter sat in his Panzer Mark IV outside Tobruk. His unit had been fighting British tanks for months. Crusaders, Valentines, nothing special. His Mark IV could handle them. His crew was experienced. They'd won every battle. Then the radio crackled. His commander's voice came through, tight, worried. New American tanks approaching, about 300. Richter looked through his periscope. He'd never seen anything like them. Big, blocky shapes moving fast across the desert. Too many to count. One of his gunners spoke up. "What are those?" Richter squinted. "Americans. Shermans." The first Sherman fired. The shell hit a German position 1,000 meters away. Dead on. At 1,000 meters. German tanks were good at 500, maybe 600. These Americans were hitting targets at twice that range. Richter's hands got sweaty. His driver asked if they should move. Before he could answer, the engagement began. The Shermans had a 75mm gun. Not the biggest, not the most powerful, but good enough. And they had something else. Numbers. For every German tank, there were 5 Shermans, sometimes 10. They came in waves. When one got hit, 2 more took its place. Richter's unit knocked out 60 tanks that day. They felt good about it. Then they retreated, because 300 more Shermans were coming the next morning. The German intelligence reports were all wrong, completely wrong. Weber's estimate said America might produce a few thousand tanks total. By the end of 1942, American factories had already built 25,000 Shermans. 25,000 in 1 year, and they were just getting started. How did they do it? The Americans built 11 separate factories just for Sherman tanks. Not one big factory, 11, in 11 different cities. Chrysler built a tank factory in Warren, Michigan. Groundbreaking in September 1940, first tank rolling off the line in April 1941. 7 months. They built the factory while they were building the tanks. The factory wasn't even finished when production started. General Motors built another plant near Flint. Ford built another in Detroit. Railway companies got in the game. The American Locomotive Company made tanks. So did Baldwin Locomotive Works. These weren't weapons manufacturers, they were train builders, car makers. But they knew mass production. They knew assembly lines, and they could scale up fast. Each factory was huge. Chrysler's plant had over 1 million square feet of floor space. 17,000 workers on 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A new Sherman came off the line every 30 minutes. Not every day, every 30 minutes. 63 minutes for a B-24 bomber at Ford's Willow Run. 30 minutes for a tank at Chrysler. The numbers were impossible, except they were real. The Shermans had 5 crew members: commander, gunner, loader, driver, and assistant driver. Each tank weighed 33 tons. It had over 50,000 parts. The engine alone had 8 cylinders putting out 500 horsepower. The gun could fire 15 rounds per minute. The armor was 2 inches thick on the front, 1.5 on the sides. It could drive 26 miles per hour on flat ground. But the genius was in the standardization. Every Sherman used interchangeable parts. A transmission from a Ford tank fits perfectly in a Chrysler tank. An engine from American Locomotive worked in a General Motors hall. This meant spare parts were everywhere. A broken tank could be fixed in hours, not days, not weeks, hours. American mechanics became famous for it. They'd rebuild a destroyed Sherman using parts from 3 other wrecks, have it running by morning. The Germans couldn't believe it. Their tanks were better, technically better. A Panther tank had better armor, better gun, better range. On paper, the Panther was superior to the Sherman in every way. But the Germans built 6,000 Panthers. The Americans built 49,000 Shermans. When your enemy has 8 tanks for every one of yours, technical superiority doesn't matter. The German soldiers learned this the hard way. Otto Carius was a Tiger tank commander, one of the best. He destroyed over 100 Allied tanks in his career. He wrote about fighting Shermans in Normandy. They came at us in waves. We'd destroy 5, 10 more would appear. We'd destroy those, 20 more would come. It never stopped. We ran out of ammunition before they ran out of tanks. Another tanker said it plainly. We knew our tanks were better, but they had 50 for every one of ours. What good is a better tank when you're drowning in enemy armor? The kill ratio proved it. In Normandy, the Germans destroyed 5 Shermans for every Panther lost. 5 to 1. Sounds good for Germany, but they built 6,000 Panthers total. America built 49,000 Shermans. Do the math. The Germans would run out of tanks long before America did. And it wasn't just tanks. In 1944, America built 96,000 aircraft. 96,000 in 1 year. Germany built about 40,000. The Soviet Union built another 40,000. Japan built 28,000. America alone was building more than Germany and Japan combined. More planes, more tanks, more trucks, more ships, more everything. The shipyards were even more impressive. America launched more ships in 1941 than Japan built during the entire war. Henry Kaiser figured out how to build a Liberty cargo ship in 42 days. His workers got so good they built one in 4 days. 4 days from laying the keel to launching it. The ship wasn't pretty, it wasn't fancy, but it floated, and it carried cargo. That's all that mattered.
By 1944, American industry produced two-thirds of all Allied military equipment. Two-thirds. The British got American trucks. The Soviets got American jeeps. The Free French got American tanks. The Chinese got American planes. The shipyards were even more impressive. America launched more ships in 1941 than Japan built during the entire war. Henry Kaiser figured out how to build a Liberty cargo ship in 42 days. His workers got so good they built one in 4 days. 4 days from laying the keel to launching it. The ship wasn't pretty, it wasn't fancy, but it floated, and it carried cargo. That's all that mattered. By 1944, American industry produced two-thirds of all Allied military equipment. Two-thirds. The British got American trucks. The Soviets got American jeeps. The Free French got American tanks. The Chinese got American planes. Everyone got American guns, American ammunition, American food, American fuel. The numbers were staggering. 297,000 aircraft, 193,000 artillery pieces, 86,000 tanks, 2 million trucks. German soldiers started calling Shermans Tommy cookers because they caught fire when hit. The crews called them Ronsons, after the lighter that lights every time. The nicknames were harsh. True, Shermans burned easier than German tanks. About 80% of Shermans that got penetrated caught fire. American tankers knew this. They were scared of it, but they kept climbing in, because there were always more Shermans. Always. The Americans fixed the fire problem too. By 1943, they redesigned the ammunition storage, put the shells on the floor, surrounded them with water jackets. Wet storage, they called it. It cut the fire rate to 15%. 15% instead of 80%. Problem solved. The Germans never could have done that. Redesigning a tank in the middle of war? Slowing production? Unthinkable. But the Americans had so much capacity, they could afford it. Roosevelt's strategy was simple. Overwhelm the enemy with production. Don't try to build the best tank. Build the most tanks. Don't try to build the perfect plane. Build 1,000 planes. Let the numbers do the work. Churchill understood it. Stalin understood it. Hitler never did. He kept demanding better weapons, bigger guns, thicker armor, more complex designs. Meanwhile, American factories kept churning out simple, reliable, mass-produced equipment. The kill ratio in Europe tells the whole story. American and British tank crews faced better German tanks throughout the war. Panthers, Tigers, King Tigers. All of them are superior in direct combat, but by the end, Germany had lost because they couldn't replace their losses. America could. A Sherman crew that got knocked out would have a new tank by the next day. A German crew that lost their Panther might wait months for a replacement, if they got one at all. The statistics from late 1944 show it clearly. There were 65 independent American Sherman tank battalions in Europe alone. 65. Plus, every infantry division had an attached Sherman battalion. Germany's entire tank production for the entire war was around 50,000 vehicles total. By late 1944, there were more Shermans in Europe than Germany had built tanks in 5 years of war. Weber never saw the end of the war. He died in an air raid in 1943. But before he died, he saw the intelligence reports, the real ones. The Americans had built 75,000 tanks by then. Not a few thousand, 75,000. His original estimate was off by a factor of 100. 100 times wrong. Russian soldiers who received Shermans through Lend-Lease praised them. Reliable, fast, easy to fix. One Russian tanker said Shermans were better suited for colonial campaigns than the Eastern Front. But he also said they were good tanks, much better than they expected. The Russians sent the Shermans to secondary fronts, where reliability mattered more than raw firepower, and the Shermans performed. At the Battle of Aricourt in September 1944, American Sherman crews faced a large force of Panthers. The Americans won decisively. Better tactics, better training, better coordination. The Sherman itself wasn't superior, but the crews were trained longer. The supply lines were better. The fuel was reliable. The ammunition was plentiful. All of this mattered as much as the tank itself. By 1945, the Americans finally fielded a heavy tank to match the Germans, the M26 Pershing. It had a 90mm gun, thicker armor, better protection. It could go toe-to-toe with a Panther. But only 20 tanks made it to Germany before the war ended. 20, because by then it didn't matter. The war was won. The Shermans had done the job. American industrial output in 1945 was bigger than the rest of the world combined. The factories that were supposed to take years to build had been running at full capacity since 1942. The workers who weren't supposed to be trained were now experts. The production numbers that Hitler called propaganda had been exceeded, then doubled, then tripled. Weber's last report estimated American tank production at maybe 10,000 total, maybe. The actual number was close to 90,000 armored fighting vehicles, not just tanks, every kind of armored vehicle. Tank destroyers, self-propelled guns, armored cars, half-tracks. The Americans built them all in quantities Germany couldn't imagine. Hans Richter survived the war. He went home to Germany in 1946, spent years in a prison camp. When he got out, he wrote about his experiences. He said the thing he remembered most wasn't the battles. It was waiting. Waiting for fuel that never came. Waiting for ammunition that was delayed. Waiting for replacement parts that didn't exist. Meanwhile, he watched American convoys roll past. Thousands of trucks. Thousands of tanks. All of them are new. All of them were maintained. An endless stream of military equipment that never stopped. He wrote, "We knew we'd lost when we saw their supply lines. You can't win against an enemy who has everything, and you have nothing. Our tanks were better. Our crews were experienced. None of it mattered. They buried us in steel." The final numbers tell the story. Germany produced about 50,000 armored vehicles during the entire war. The Soviet Union produced about 100,000. America produced over 90,000, and that's just for America. Add British production, Canadian production, everyone else. The Axis powers were outnumbered 3-to-1 in tanks alone, 5-to-1 in aircraft, 10-to-1 in trucks. Roosevelt called it the arsenal of democracy. The German intelligence services called it impossible, but it happened. America built more tanks, planes, ships, and guns than any nation in history, and they did it in less than 4 years. From 39th in the world to the greatest military industrial power on Earth. Weber's estimates were wrong. Hitler's advisors were wrong. The entire German intelligence apparatus was wrong. 49,324 Sherman tanks. That's the final count. Plus 38,000 other tanks and tank destroyers. Plus 297,000 aircraft. Plus millions of trucks, jeeps, and other vehicles. The largest military-industrial mobilization in human history. Thanks for watching. Next time, we'll look at how American logistics won the Battle of the Bulge. Don't forget to subscribe. History like this is too important to miss.